after the election, I Googled churches near me and I looked on Google Maps and I went through the list of every church within maybe like 30 miles of my house. And I emailed every single one. There was like, well, maybe not every single one. There were actually there were a lot. The list was endless, but I think I emailed around 30 churches. And I said, my name is Christy. I am an atheist ex-Christian. I run a YouTube channel that helps people deconstruct, but I am not your enemy. And I know that the church has a history of fighting against oppression, fighting for the separation of church and state, and that Christians can be a very powerful force for good against authoritarianism, against fascism. And I didn't get a single email back. And when I tell people that, they're like, oh, I'm not surprised. And I guess I'm always willing to give the benefit of a doubt. I do believe that there are still Christians and still Christian churches that if we could just tap into their community, they would be more than willing to fight for freedom, democracy, and their rights in their own way. And so I've kind of made up a little list of things that I think ex Christians bring to the table, why they are suited for the resistance and for fighting oppression, and also Christians and their strengths, what they can bring to the table. I'm going to start with the ex Christians. And first up on my list, we've been here. We've resisted before in like the biggest way personally, and we won. And we know how it's done. I know what it's like to resist oppression. I know what it's like to go against authoritarianism. I already know their tricks. I know how they try to control. And I'm prepared, I am primed to continue resisting systems of oppression. And although there's a lot more to what we're experiencing in the United States than just Christian nationalism has been the tool that has been used for decades to prime America for what's happening right now. And so I have a pretty good grasp on how to resist that and fight against it. And not even in a way that is violent or, full of rage, but in a way that is smart, creative, logical, and actually gets something done. And so if you are an ex-Christian and you walked away from everything, you've been through it. You've already done this before. You have the experience needed to continue resisting. We are truth seekers. So many of us left the Christian church because we wanted truth. We wanted to live in reality. We wanted what we knew inside and felt inside to align with the beliefs and the system that we follow. There's a reason we left. And most people don't leave because they had a bad experience. Usually when you have a bad experience in a church, you just find another church to go to. Your beliefs about God and spirituality don't change. What makes that change is that you realize that it might not be aligning with reality. And so you seek out truth. You seek out spaces that help you critically think and help you navigate with reason and rationality. And that is really important. And another thing a lot of people don't have. A lot of people are walking around just kind of not really practicing critical thinking. I do think it's a practice. It's something you have to continue to work at, and then it becomes kind of a habit, but it takes a while, and not everybody has that tool. So the fact that we are just already natural truth seekers and we seek out knowledge and we're good at kind of bypassing disinformation and finding out the truth, I think that's a really important part of the resistance and of educating others, informing others, and not getting trapped into the disinformation that is all around us. We understand the mindset of the Christian right because we lived it and we believed it. That's what we came from. And so I know a lot of people who deconstruct might not have come from right-wing Christianity, but my channel has always been geared toward one specific kind of section of the Christian bubble. So we know how they think, we know what they believe, we know their tactics and the just the thought processes that they go through. And so not only can we navigate that because we understand it, but also because we understand it, we can empathize. And empathy is so important. A lot of people think empathy is action, like it's something you do, but empathy is really just understanding. It's like emotional wisdom. It's the ability to understand someone's point of view even if you don't have that point of view yourself. When you understand those that oppose you, it becomes a lot easier to kind of bypass all of the fighting and to get to the heart and the root of the problem. We have the ability to connect with and speak to the hearts of people on the opposite side of the political and religious spectrum in a way that those who have not had to walk away from Christianity, who have never been on the right, just can't or might not be able to do as well. And so I do think it's a superpower. I think our ability to understand and speak to that side is such a powerful tool in unifying and cutting down on the divide that this administration has created between us. I am not the enemy of the Christian. The Christian is not the enemy of me. But this administration, those in power, have made us believe that we are each other's enemies by feeding us a bunch of information about one another. And a lot of times it's not true. Our values are too big for their system. And I think for a lot of us, we had to fight so hard to hold these values and hold them confidently in the face of those we love and care about telling us how wrong and bad and evil we are, that when we figured out what justice was, what love and empathy and compassion, what that meant to us, and we had everyone in our lives telling us, you're wrong, you're satanic, you're evil, you're being tricked by Satan, and you'll be punished for it. We stood strong in that because we trusted our heart, we trusted ourselves, our intuition. We were able to not only find our values, but hold tight to them. Because when you have to work so hard to find them and, against all odds, they become that much more important to cling to and to have integrity for. And integrity is something that's lacking in a lot of our society, especially on the right. We have experienced a life after leaving a dominant authoritarian system. We know what it's like on the other side. We know how scary it is, how uncertain it feels, and we can use that experience to inspire others who are concerned, who want to resist, but are afraid of the consequences of that, afraid of losing their loved ones, losing support of others in their community. I think that we can speak to that uncertainty and that fear, and we can connect to people who are feeling that uncertainty and fear and help guide them through it. In our time, when we have healed or, at least have done the work to heal, acknowledge and live alongside our anger and our bitterness and our pain and our trauma, I don't really believe in getting rid of those things. I think that those things are very helpful. Our anger and our bitterness is literally what helps us fight for justice. And so I don't think we need to get rid of those things. It's learning how to acknowledge that they are there and that they help you, but knowing how to channel them, how to harness them, and how to use them for good rather than for bad. And so we can be the bridge between the religious and secular community in our time when we're ready to do so. That's how I think the ex-Christians, I think that's, that those are their strengths and the things that they bring to the table. And I'm hoping that inspired you and reminded you of how much you've gone through and your strength and your ability and how you can use that in this resistance. But now I want to touch on why I think that the Christian church is primed and ready, possibly even more so than ex-Christians, to resist authoritarianism, resist fascism, and to preserve our freedoms and preserve their religious freedom, because that is also at stake too. First of all, Christians follow Jesus. He was a radical, anti-power, anti-wealth, anti-establishment. He flipped tables in holy rage. So this was not just a nice, happy guy who was just promoting peace and love to everyone he met. When he saw injustice, when he saw people that were being exploited and taken advantage of, he became angry in his righteousness and his desire for justice, and he quite literally flipped tables. He stood for those that society would not accept, didn't want to even touch or look at. He believed that being humble and lifting up the lowly, lifting up the marginalized, that was the key to a better society and a better future. Most of what Jesus did and taught was about love, empathy, compassion, justice, making sure that those whose voices were not heard were lifted up, and those whose voices were the loudest were quieted. Remember when he told them, don't go in the streets and pray like the hypocrites. Go into the closet and pray by yourself. Be quiet about it. But then he would meet with those that were being marginalized and oppressed, and he would amplify their voice, and he would listen to them, and he would give them his time. And it's what the left is all about, to be honest. It's about lifting up the marginalized. They get mad at us for engaging in culture wars and fighting for just 1% of the population. I believe now in our situation, we do have to speak to the issues that affect and impact everyone, and be careful not to get pulled into culture wars. But it is interesting how we are blamed for doing this, even though we don't even start most of the culture wars. We're blamed for doing this when that's literally the ministry of Jesus. And we're blamed by Christians who claim to follow Jesus. If Jesus were here today, I believe he would be flipping tables in every church that wasn't resisting this oppression, but was claiming him every Sunday. Another thing that I think is a really important thing for Christians to remember when considering if they should be resisting right now is that although the church in the United States and really all over the world has a long history of oppressing others, of oppression and causing suffering, that's not the entire church. And many Christian churches, including and most importantly in the United States Baptist and even Southern Baptist, in some parts of history, they have a lot of experience in resisting government oppression, resisting the violation of the separation of church and state. There is a history there of churches standing for the separation of church and state because they understand that if the government can violate that with one area or one denomination, then they can do it across the board and everybody's religious freedom is at stake. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist preacher. He claimed Christianity, he preached Christianity, he loved God, he loved Jesus, and he was considered an enemy of a lot of people and of the government because of his resistance against government oppression and his fight for civil rights. He believed so much in his values, his desire for justice and equality, that took over his anything that anybody had taught him about being submissive, just following the rules like a lot of people were doing at the time. He didn't do that because he knew that he had something worth fighting for, and that thing worth fighting for was the very thing Jesus told him to fight for. So he did that even in the face of being arrested, even in the face of breaking the law. And I think that the Christians really need to remember that. I hope to see more Christians channeling people like Martin Luther King Jr. over people like Billy Graham, who had a really big kind of grip on the United States in the mid-century. But he was not willing to break the rules and get rowdy and cause some disruption in his town or in his country for civil rights. He felt like those that were fighting to be equal, to have the same rights as he was, needed to just calm down and pump the brakes, as he said. He said that after Martin Luther King Jr. was jailed in Birmingham. But there were two types of Christians. There were the kind that stood for themselves, that wanted to promote following the rules, even though that was very anti-Jesus. But there were also Christians that knew what they were fighting for was justice, and equality and the things that mattered most to the Jesus that they preached. Another strength that the churches have that they really have this advantage over everyone else is the infrastructure. Churches have money, they have community, they have numbers, they have organization and programs and leaders and all these moving parts that work together. And they have been doing so for a very long time. So if we can tap into these communities, I mean, this is what the religious right did, okay? The religious right, the moral majority, the Heritage Foundation, when they were building up, they saw that there were all these Christians with all these churches, and they already had these big groups, and if you could just reach one, then you can reach them all. And so they were like, how can we tap into this? Paul Wayrick of the Heritage Foundation, he looked at the moral majority, Jerry Falwell, and he said, that guy, he has a lot of people listening to him. How can I tap into his audience? And so he partnered up with Jerry Falwell, and they partnered really over racism more than anything, probably, and desire for power and control. And they started tapping into these Christian audiences and speaking to the churches and combining this political and religious messaging. And they had so much money and influence behind them that they were able to do that very easily by, creating radio shows and programming and getting all these people on their side that had influential voices that could just speak to their congregations and get the churches involved. And they started going all these rallies across America and galvanizing support from the Christian churches. But before they did that, the Christian churches were actually fighting for civil rights. They were fighting for the right to abortion. Southern Baptist, about 6 or 7 years before they were anti-abortion, were actually fighting for abortion rights for women. They believed that it was up to the woman to have autonomy over her body, and they didn't want the government interfering in that. That's a very dangerous thing, to tell the government that they're allowed to tell a woman what she is and isn't allowed to do with her body. And they believed that it wasn't until a baby took its first breath that it was a person that should be recognized and protected. So the Southern Baptists were writing letters to their representatives and were actively encouraging their congregations and their communities to stand up for women's rights. And when Roe v. Wade was passed, they celebrated it. They were happy about it, most of them at least. And then it was 6, 7 years later that they were tricked into these culture wars created by the Heritage Foundation, by Jerry Falwell and their friends. And they created this fight against women, against liberals, against leftists and atheistic communists and all this stuff. They created a fight against anyone that didn't conform to their goals and what they wanted to accomplish. None of us would really be fighting about abortion, and women would have rights and bodily autonomy, and Christians would support it had it not been for the manipulation of the religious right in the mid-century and in the 70s and the 80s. We can get Christians to kind of get back to their roots, to bypass all of the disinformation and the culture wars and the manipulation and the exploitation that they were dragged into by people in power that just wanted to make a lot of money and have a lot of power and serve corporate interests. If they can bypass that and get back to their roots, then they can be a strong fighting force with the infrastructure they already have, and tap into these communities and get them out and standing for real Christian values: love, justice, mercy, compassion, empathy. They can mobilize fast and in big numbers. And so I am trying so hard to learn how to tap into the churches. Again, I reached out to a lot of churches in my area. Nobody wrote back, but I'm not stopping. And I'm going to keep trying to meet up with religious leaders and encourage them not to go for a political party. It's not about being partisan. This is no longer a right versus left, red versus blue issue. This is a class struggle. This is the 99% against the top 1% of the wealthiest people in the world that are trying to oppress us and get their way. And also, Christians have a moral voice that matters in America. Their morality is the standard. And I might not agree with all of it, but I think if we boil it all down, our values are probably very much the same. And the Christian right and Christian nationalists, the GOP, these fake Christians, even like Diana Harshbarger, who uses the Bible to hide behind her oppressive policies and initiatives, they have hijacked the Christian faith and they have used it as a weapon against the American people. And if Christians start waking up and realizing that, they can take back their faith, take back their religion, and get back to what it was supposed to be, a personal relationship with God that brings them joy and hope, and that they can recruit people to their religion, not by forcing it, not by law, not by trying to be the moral standard, but by showcasing those values, showcasing that morality. I've always said that if Christians spent less time evangelizing, trying to enforce their religious ideologies via law and in our government, and they just went out into the world and lived by the words of Jesus, feed the hungry, heal the sick, show mercy to those who need it, lift up the marginalized. If they were just out there doing that every day and that was what they did, and they cut out all the other stuff, I think they'd see more Christians recruited to their religion. Jesus said that you are to serve the world. You're supposed to be servants. You're not supposed to lift yourself up to be better, to be superior, and to tell everyone else what they're supposed to do. Your job is to be a servant of the world and to look around and say, how can I help? How can I make the world a better place? How can I honor the words of Jesus when he says to lift up the marginalized? And if Christians were grouping up and just doing that, just everyday mission work, I don't even think they'd ever even have to bring up Jesus to get people to ask them, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And can I join it? And I believe that the voice of the Christian is going to reach a lot more than the voice of the atheist or the ex-Christian. And that people are more likely, just based on our society, to heed the words of the Christian than they are to, listen to anything I have to say, because that's just how our society is. We are a Christian nation, as they like to claim. And so I think they can use that to reclaim their faith instead of falling in line with the exploitation of their faith, which a lot of them are doing. I think that they need to reclaim it, and they need to show the world what it's supposed to be. And it's supposed to be about fighting systems of oppression, fighting against wealth and power, and lifting up the voices of those that don't usually have much of a voice in our society. The Christian faith can stand as something that gives Christian strength and resilience and can inspire activism in the long run. We don't need to believe the same thing to fight for the same future. And I have said it for a long time, and I really do believe it. If a Christian and an atheist or ex-Christian sat down together and talked about, they boiled down all the political noise and just talked about their values, I think that we would connect so much more. I mean, even I've been trying to find ways to boil down even the most divisive issues. And it's like when I come to thinking about abortion, that's a very divisive one. Both sides are like, you're a murderer. And I don't know that we can ever agree on our position on abortion, pro-life versus pro-choice. But if you were to take someone who is pro-life and someone who is pro-choice, and you boil out the noise, you boil out the political propaganda, and you try to find the one single common value that drives both of you to your position, I think you would both realize that human life is the value. You value human life. The person who is very anti-abortion values the life of the unborn. That is very important to them. It's human life and they want to protect it. The person who is pro-choice and wants to protect women values the life of the living, breathing woman, and protecting someone who deserves to be protected and have autonomy over their body. So when you boil it all down, you forget all the propaganda and the noise, you both agree that human life is valuable and you fight for it. Now you just got to kind of sort through it to figure out how best to approach those values and to move forward in a way that honors both of your values for human life. And I actually think we can do that, but that's for another time. Maybe I'll make another video on that. I think we need to be working more to have more productive conversations, to find shared values, and realize that both sides have challenged systems of oppression. Both sides have a history of seeking justice. And if we can connect on that, I think that will actually get very far. We have been told that we're enemies, but I believe we can be teammates. I believe we can form an alliance, and we might not agree on God and spirituality and the afterlife, but why do we need to? Does the God that created all of this and put all of this into motion really care if we agree about his characteristics or about what he wants? As long as our values for love, justice, empathy, kindness, compassion, well being, life, liberty, happiness, if those values remain and we're all fighting for those same values, we have to coexist. We're trying to have a better future for all of us and recognize that there will never be a future where Christians don't exist. There will never be a future where atheists don't exist. We're always going to be here. We have to figure out how to balance and get along and to fight for the same common values that we both share, but we've been taught that we're enemies. There's all this disinformation about each side, and it is intentional. It was fed to us by those in power that want us divided, because the moment we come together and form an alliance is the moment they lose. They lose and we win. So why wouldn't we fight for that? Why wouldn't we figure out a way, not just for the sake of being nice, not for the sake of being kind and standing in a circle and getting along, but for the sake of our future, and to find the most logical, productive way to secure all of our rights. At the end of it, if we can secure our democracy and our freedom, the Christians can go their way and go to their church and practice their religion. We can go our way and, dance naked under the moon in our satanic circles or whatever they think they think we do. We can go our own way. We don't have to be best friends at the end of it. But can we work together to preserve the things that both sides really do and have always cared about? We've just been tricked into thinking that we don't actually share those same values by people that want to be in power over us, to control us, to hoard wealth, to exploit our labor, to use us, abuse us, to starve us, take away our healthcare, to completely abandon us as people and strip us of our humanity so that we can just be a system that continues to give them the life they want. None of us want that. If we really look at it the reality of the situation, no matter who you are, if you're in the 99%, you don't want to just be someone that is being used, manipulated, exploited, and tossed aside, discarded, so that Jeff Bezos can buy another yacht, or so that Elon Musk can keep blowing up rockets in space and make his mission to Mars, and so these people can just make money and have power and feel good about themselves because they are the best, they are at the top, and they have hoarded all the wealth and taken everything from us so that they can have the best, not even just so they can have the best life. They already have the best life, but so they can have more, so they can be the best. They can be number one, superior. They're just, they're fighting for their own superiority to be better than the other. And we're just trying to eat and raise kids and go to school and work our jobs and have enough time outside of our jobs to enjoy our lives. Enjoy the one life we know we're guaranteed. I know for a fact I'm only guaranteed this one life, and I want it to be good and secure, and I want to enjoy it, and I want to have freedom. Freedom is the most important thing. And those in the church want freedom for their religion. I want freedom from religion. And we all want the freedom to live and to be and to follow our most authentic path. And most of us have good hearts and good intentions. And even those that seemingly don't have probably just been used and manipulated and exploited by those in power that have the ability, the time, and the power to shift our perspective to benefit them, but not us and one another. We need each other. We need unity. We need to resist what's happening and we need to preserve our freedom and our democracy. And I encourage you to reach out, to invite friends to join you in this resistance and in this hope for an alliance between ex-Christians and Christians, and that we can we can preserve what's important and special to us as Americans. For a long time, we have walked different paths, kind of walking in different directions, avoiding each other. But now I hope that we can move forward side by side, arms linked, as Americans, as human beings, at the heart of it. And all the other stuff we can sort out later.